Hi everyone, I'm John Gottfried and this is Bare Metal from Root TV, where we talk about real technology with the human beings behind it. Today we're here with Jonathan Wegener, the co-founder of Timehop, to talk about the implications of our digital history. Thanks for coming today, Jonathan, and it's great to be here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. So the first thing I want to talk about is kind of the origins of Timehop. I was there at the Foursquare hackathon, I believe it was 3 years ago now, where you built Foursquare and 7 years ago, which was kind of the precursor to Timehop. And you know, it's pretty rare for this kind of hack to turn into a real company. Could you tell us a little bit about that story and how it evolved?
Sure. It was February 2011. It was Foursquare's first ever hackathon that they threw. My co-founder and I, Benny, were working on a different company as part of Techstars at the time. But we were both huge Foursquare fanboys, hackers, had built a ton of things on their API, knew their API in and out. And so we decided we had to go to this hackathon and we had to build something fun. And we had this idea about a week before, which was to do a replay of your past, kind of in the style of the ghost in Mario Kart, where you do a lap in Mario Kart and you get to see, the second time you do that lap, you get to see your first go, replay it over your second, and you can see whether you're trailing or beating your last lap by whether you're ahead or behind of your ghost. And so the original idea was that you would take your Foursquare data, we would take your Foursquare data, we would make you a second Foursquare account, we would replay that with a 1-year delay, and you'd be friends with the ghost of yourself. And so that was the product, and we went into the Foursquare hackathon and had about 8 hours to build it and realized it was out of scope, and so we scoped it down into basically a daily email. And that's how the product got started. It was the simplest, it was a beautifully simple product. The entire product consisted of 2 pages, a landing page, Timehop, or Foursquare and 7yearsago.com, that explained the product, and then when you clicked on it, it was a thank you page. And it was used Foursquare OAuth, there was no other forms, nothing. We got all of the data on the back end. And we just started sending you emails the next day, and so it was like almost an interfaceless product. It was super simple and super quick.
That's pretty cool. I mean, you see a lot of hacks today that are kind of being built that are, I suppose, intended to be businesses, but it seems to me like Foursquare and 7 years ago was kind of something you found personally interesting that evolved organically into a product, right? As far as I understand, it wasn't meant to be a product starting out.
No, we had no real plans of working on it. We didn't really consider it a big product. It was just a fun little hack that we were building. And we built it not knowing whether it would be interesting, and as soon as we launched it and tried it ourselves, and Benny, my co-founder, when Benny read me my Foursquare check-ins from a year ago, it was this moment of like, wow, that's what I was doing a year ago. I remember who I was there with, I remember where I was, I remember exactly what we were talking about. It was this like wave of nostalgia that was super, super powerful, and we turned to each other and we were like, we just created something really powerful.
Yeah.
And the other people in the room that day who signed up, only 20 of them, maybe 30 of them, at the hackathon, didn't know why they would want a product, didn't understand it. In the same way that we couldn't have predicted it, they couldn't have predicted it. And then when they started getting this replay of their past, they found it really, really personal and powerful and really interesting. And just people got addicted to their daily emails.
Why do you think that this kind of nostalgic look back at what we were doing a year ago, even like the minutiae of day-to-day life, why is that so powerful to people? Why do you find it so powerful?
I don't know why it's powerful. I just know that it is. My heart skips a beat when I see those little photos, and you kind of have this like warm, like, oh my God, I remember that day, and the memories just come flooding back, and it's this really pleasurable, very human sensation.
Yeah. At the time, at least to me, it often seems pretty valueless. Like I'll take a photo of a sandwich and tweet it, and obviously that's the main use case for Twitter. So, if I look back and see that I took a photo of a sandwich a year ago, why is that content now more valuable to me than it was at the time that I created it?
The best way I can describe it is to copy what Bijan, one of our investors, said. And Bijan basically looked at our product and our initial pitch to them, and he said, "Oh, I get it. This is really simple. The content you create gains value with time." And he kind of did this with his finger, I think. He was like, you Instagram something today, it's got some value.
Yeah.
And then, a week later, that Instagram picture, that tweet, it's not that interesting. A few days later, so it goes down. And then it comes back around, because that photo from you 5 years ago and 10 years ago, like that's all the way up here. Like that's super, super valuable. And so I think, like a bottle of wine, content ages well and gets more interesting with time. And the reason you take that photo, before the internet even existed, before the reason was to share it, the reason you took photos was to document and to remember something, to remember that birthday party, remember that graduation, wedding, whatever, that great picture. And Timehop helps you do that. It helps you relive that past, and it gives you an excuse to look at that photo that you wouldn't otherwise have a reason to, but the reason you took the photo was to look at it. So yeah. Timehop's kind of the catcher's mitt. Like you threw the baseball because you wanted to look at it later, and Timehop catches it, lets you look at it later.
That's a really good analogy. So our data is like a good bottle of wine. What are some of the technical hurdles that you've faced collecting all this data? Because I know that now, at least, you collect data from many, many different sources, and I imagine it can be difficult to archive and correlate all of that in a meaningful way. So how have you kind of dealt with that, and how have you kind of grown your technology stack over time?
It's been really tough. We could never have predicted all the problems that we would run into, and people from the outside look at it and they're like, "Oh, it's such a simple product. I could copy that in a day." And it's really hard to get right, and to get right at scale, especially. We work with several different APIs, which is itself difficult because there's always quirks and things being deprecated and things changing and things breaking. We work with a partner called Singly, Singly.com, that helps us kind of abstract a lot of that complication, and they deal with the APIs directly, and we just deal with them. But we've had, when you're building a product on other platforms, and Timehop is right now still pretty heavily social media focused, there's just all sorts of problems you run into, things breaking, things changing, running into limits, running into storage. And some of them we could never have predicted, like time zones turn out to be really, really hard. Yeah. You take a picture on Instagram right now, and then you take a picture in China, and then the location sometimes is in the photo, sometimes not. The time is where the phone was, but not always. Like Facebook passes back the time zone that the user lives in, but it's not necessarily where the time zone was where the content was created. Yeah. So getting timestamps right has been really surprisingly hard.
Interesting. And I suppose that since you're kind of very deeply connected to all of these third-party platforms, that there is some danger as well of them deprecating a key feature to your product, right? Just as an example, like Twitter, right? It seems like they completely redo their API every 6 months, right? And I imagine that makes it very difficult to kind of stay connected to all these services and continue to collect user data. Is that something that you've had to deal with, or?
If anything, I think the trend is moving towards making it easier to get user data. When we started, Facebook wasn't reliably able to give us historic data. When we started in 2011, Facebook wasn't able to give us that data reliably, and they've gotten much better about it. Twitter had for years and years a limit of 3,200 tweets, and it's only in the past year, I believe, that they introduced, I guess it was in December, that they rolled out the Twitter archive,
right, yeah.
So where you could actually get the rest of your history.
Yeah.
So if anything, the trend is moving towards increased accessibility to this data rather than decreased.
That's definitely a nice advantage of being a historical platform, you know. So as you're collecting all this data and as you're kind of archiving it and correlating it, how do you deal with some of the inherent privacy issues in that, right? Where you're essentially mirroring my online identity, right? Do you maintain all the privacy settings from all these services? Is it up to the user to secure it? What's kind of the story there?
Timehop is a private first product. We only show your content to you. And so you're looking, like you said, you're looking into a mirror of your past, but you're not seeing anyone else's mirror.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because we've played with a number of product designs internally where we've changed that variable. We've let you see your friend's past and vice versa. And even if we're only touching public data, old tweets and old Facebook statuses that you could go back and look at. I could go back and look at your Facebook timeline and like find that post. People are still a little bit uncomfortable with it. And so we've shied away from building that, like something that shows you your friend's past, because people consider their pasts private. The older things get, the more private they seem to get. Like your college photos feel like blackmail, like when you're a professional. Those photos of you drinking in college are like blackmail material. So it's interesting that people find their pasts very private, and so we've designed a product with that in mind.
I find that really like fascinating that people find their data more kind of personal the older it is. I actually just noticed today that Facebook launched something that let you kind of reminisce about old posts, and it seems like more and more services are moving towards this like kind of open digital history, right? Like Twitter certainly does archiving, Facebook is, and I kind of wonder, what the implications of that are. Like, obviously the college drinking photos are a great example, because maybe I'm, young, I don't really care right now, but in 30 years, I could be running for, some political like seat, and someone could pull up those old photos of me, wearing a tutu at a college party, right? Like, where's the line drawn between, kind of the actual ownership of that data, right? Because obviously people have ways to get at it. Obviously not necessarily through Timehop, but someone could go back and look at all of my Facebook posts or Twitter or anything and dig up something that I didn't care about at the time, but now is very kind of damaging. What do you think?
I'll tell you a quick story about Timehop. Our best use case is parents. We had this tweet a few weeks ago that was something like, pro tip, to get the most out of Timehop, have children. Which is a hilarious suggestion that you should have kids just to use Timehop. But it's true, like the people who have a young child and then they get to relive day by day the like pregnancy and then the birth of that child. As they're holding the kid in their arms, they're like looking at Timehop and like seeing, wow, this is the world before. Because so much changes. In 9 months you go from 0 to a living being. And Timehop in that 1 year replay is like super, super powerful. And so it's interesting that, as you said, for these teenagers, like a 1 year or 2 year period is a whole different life. In this case, for parents watching the kid, they're watching the beginning of a whole life replay in this 1 year span. And it's similarly, so much changes so quickly that in one case, Timehop is almost bad, right? The teenagers don't want to remember who they were 2 years ago when they were goth. And for the parents, they do want to remember a year ago and 2 years ago, because this kid is just growing up so fast, they would do anything to slow down time and like enjoy the moment.
I mean, my parents still pull out like the old VHS tape of like me dancing around as a little kid. So, as this kind of like becomes more and more open, as it becomes more common, are there any technologies that you think will aid this creation of our digital history? Like, what's kind of next as far as digital archiving goes?
I think there's a few things we haven't seen yet. One is just some kind of mainstream background tracking thing, tracking
what
location,
do you mean by that?
Like a passive foursquare, something that is a diary that you don't have to write, and as you walk around town, it records where you go and where you are and who you're spending time with. I mean, lots of people have tried it. Path, I think, tried a version called With that was kind of explicit, like you check in the people. Hashable was in some ways doing the same, like a record of everyone you spend time with.
Google Latitude,
background tracking. But nobody's really won that game, and it's I don't know why, but I feel like it's still to be won. I mean, the other big trend we're watching is your existing digital history moving online. So your digital photos from 5 years ago are still largely on a hard drive somewhere. And increasingly, they're moving to Dropbox, they're moving to the cloud, they're moving to cloud services, they're moving to PhotoStream. And that's great because, one, it's secure and backed up and not going to get lost and deleted and have the hard drive crash. But it's also important for Timehop because it means that the trend is more and more data is accessible.
Yeah.
More and more of your digital history is now is an API call away.
Yep.
And that helps us create a much, much richer experience as all of your data moves to the cloud.
Have you heard any stories from your users about like really powerful ways that this has affected them?
We have a million stories. We've seen everything from the comical of people leaving themselves notes to the future. So one of my favorite stories is this. We have this user, Elizabeth, who took a photo of her air filter that she had just installed in her house and said, note to future Elizabeth, it's time to change your air filter. And every year that filter needs to be changed. And sure enough, she saw it in Timehop. She was like, all right, it's time to change my air filter. That was like her leaving herself a reminder for the future. So
Yeah.
that was really cool. We got an email once from a user on Halloween where he just sent us screenshots of Timehop, and it was his 6-year-old. And there was pictures of his 6-year-old as a 5-year-old in Halloween costumes, and as a 4-year-old in Halloween costumes, as a 3-year-old and as a 2-year-old. It was basically the entirety of this kid's life in the different costume of every Halloween replayed on the same day.
Yeah.
And it was this incredibly powerful cross look back at his child's life.
Yeah.
That was really cool. We've heard stories of people who see in their Timehop that a year ago they ran 16 miles, and they wake up and like, hell, I'm not gonna let my year ago self beat me, and then they go run 17 miles this year. So we've seen people competing with themselves. The most powerful stories I think are the ones where people use Timehop to reconnect with friends. They forward their emails. They forward emails of the Timehop content. They text message. They tweet and tag friends like a year ago it was that. And so we've heard dozens of stories from people that say, I went and did that again with those same people because Timehop told me it.
The fact that a digital product that in many ways is extremely kind of bare bones, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like as far as the user experience, the fact that it creates such an emotional connection and such a kind of powerful memory, is amazing to me at least. Especially when we have all these services that are very much kind of non-emotional and very, very much like bare. There's not much there, and I love that you can kind of reconnect with people and learn from your past.
Yeah, Timehop's a very simple, flat product with a lot of use cases. It's kind of like Twitter.
Yeah.
You can use it to tell the world what you had for breakfast. You can use it to follow breaking news. You can use it to find celebrities. You can use it to ask for concert tickets at the last minute. Timehop's kind of the same way. Like you can use it to reconnect with friends. You can use it to laugh at yourself. You can use it to leave yourself reminders of bets and who's going to win this bet in a year. You can just consume it passively and never share it.
Yeah.
You can learn from your mistakes from it. You can just use it to cry about how much better things were. You can use it to get over an ex and be like, oh yeah, that was a bad relationship or something like that. It's a flexible product.
Absolutely. Is there anything you'd like to leave us with? Any words of wisdom?
I guess the words of wisdom I would share are start small. Every great product starts with some small insight about the world and about what people want to do and what people want to see. I think when a lot of people approach building a product and starting a company, they have this they think they need to have this grandiose vision and this grandiose product, and therefore it's going to have all these 6 features and these 10 screens, and it's going to support that. And I see way too many product launches that are just over-engineered and overthought. And in most cases, you can pretty quickly tell whether you have a winner if you just get a simple product at the door. And at the heart of every product is a very simple assumption about the world and a very simple offering. Twitter is a concise way to chat with your friends. Facebook started as Face Mash, a way of looking at friends' faces. Timehop started as Foursquare 7 years ago, and from the beginning of Timehop, we knew we were onto something powerful, and people had such an emotional connection to the product. The challenge has always been, how do we get it bigger? How do we get a deeper experience? How do we bring this from 2 people in the room to millions and millions of users? But if you don't start small and win 2 users over and 10 users over and make a product that at least your friends love, then it's going to be pretty impossible to get millions of users to love it.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. And I certainly look forward to seeing kind of how it evolves in the future, as more and more of this data becomes available. Cool, man. Well, thanks for chatting with us today.
Yeah.
It was really great, and I look forward to the future of Timehop.
Thank you.